Italian mobsters, bank robbers, and criminals. This isn't a video you want to miss. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 famous Alcatraz inmates they hid from you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, welcome to Alcatraz. Number 10, John and Clarence Anglin. These two convicts are brothers, so I put them both in the same spot. The two were born into a family of 13 kids, but were inseparable together. The brothers began robbing banks and other establishments as a team in the early 1950s, usually targeting businesses that were closed to ensure that no one got injured. They claimed that they used a weapon only once during a bank heist, a toy gun. In 1958, John, Clarence, and Alfred Anglin robbed the Columbia Savings Bank building in Columbia, Alabama. All received 35-year sentences, which they served at Florida State Prison, Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, and then Atlanta Penitentiary. After repeated attempts to escape from the Atlanta facility, John and Clarence were transferred to Alcatraz. The brothers were also a part of the world-famous escape from Alcatraz, though no one knows if it was successful or not. Number 9, Herbert Allen Farmer. Herbert, along with his wife, provided a safe house for underworld fugitives from the mid-1920s to 1933. In the 1920s, his farm in southwest Missouri was a safe harbor for bank robbers and other criminals of the Cookson Hills region, such as Harvey Bailey, Frank Nash, Wilbur Underhill, Big Bob Brady, and the Holden Keating Gang. In the public enemy era, as organized crime strengthened and expanded in the United States, the farm became part of a network of safe houses for gangsters along the Midwest crime corridor. On the 16th of 1933, Herbert and Esther Farmer were involved in the plan which set into motion the Kansas City Massacre, a pivotal event in Depression-era crime. With 5 others, they were convicted of conspiracy to free a federal prisoner, Frank Nash, in January 1935. He received the maximum fine for his actions and was sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, later being transferred to Alcatraz. Number 8, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, also known as Bumpy. Johnson was an associate of Madame Stephanie St. Clair, a queen at a certain game called Numbers, which is really just an illegal lottery. He became her principal lieutenant in the 1930s before they both started a fight with the New York mob boss Dutch Schultz. The fight resulted in 40 people executed and several kidnapped. Eventually, the fight was over and Johnson's side lost. In 1952, Johnson's activities were reported in the Celebrity People section of Jet magazine. That same year, Johnson was sentenced to 15 years in prison for a substance conspiracy conviction. 2 years later, Jet magazine reported in its crime section that Johnson began his sentence after losing an appeal. He served the majority of that sentence at Alcatraz Prison in San Francisco Bay, California, as inmate number 1117. Number 7, Alvin Corpus. Corpus was born in Montreal, Quebec, but raised in Kansas. He began his life of crime at the age of only 10 years old. At that age, he ran around with gamblers and bootleggers. After moving to Kansas City, Missouri, he was caught stealing a car and sent back to the reformatory. Transferred to the Kansas State Penitentiary in Lansing, he met Fred Barker, who was in prison for bank burglary. Barker was one of the notorious members of the Bloody Barkers, as the newspapers of the time called them. The Barker-Corpus gang became one of the most formidable criminal gangs of the 1930s. They did not hesitate to execute anyone who got in their way, even innocent bystanders. On December 19, 1931, Corpus and Fred Barker executed Sheriff C. Roy Kelly, who was investigating the robbery of a store in West Plains, Missouri. The gang, including Ma Barker and her paramour, Arthur Dunlop, fled to St. Paul, Minnesota. Corpus has been described as the leader or brains of the gang. Gang members Fred Hunter said Corpus was super smart and he was reported to have a photographic memory. The capture of Corpus essentially ended the age of big-name Depression-era criminals. Corpus was incarcerated at the then recently constructed Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary from August 1936 to April 1962. He served the longest sentence ever at Alcatraz, 26 years. Number 6, Morton Sobel. Morton Sobel was an American engineer and Soviet spy during and after WW2. He was charged as part of a conspiracy which included Julius Rosenberg and his wife. Sobel worked on military and government contracts with General Electric and Reeves Instrument Corporation in the 1940s, including during WW2. Sobel was tried and convicted of espionage in 1951 and sentenced to 30 years in prison. According to NKGB agent Alexander Feklisov, Sobel was recruited as a spy in the summer of 1944 during WW2 when the Soviet Union had become an ally of the United States. Sobel was deferred from active military service because he was a top specialist in his field. When I asked him if he could microfilm his own documents, he replied it was not a problem since he knew photography quite well. At our next meeting, I brought him a camera with the necessary accessories and a small stock of film. Sobel was initially sent to Alcatraz, but was transferred to Lewisburg Penitentiary when that prison closed in 1963. Number 5, Al Scarface Al Capone. Alphonse Gabriel Capone, sometimes known by the nickname Scarface, was an American gangster and businessman who attained notoriety during the Prohibition era as the co-founder and boss of the Chicago Outfit. The Chicago Outfit was an Italian-American organized crime syndicate based in Chicago, Illinois. Capone was widely assumed to have been responsible for ordering the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre, despite being at his Florida home at the time of the massacre. The massacre was an attempt to eliminate Bugs Moran. Number 4, Robert Stroud. Robert Franklin Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, was a convicted executioner, American federal prisoner, and author who has been cited as one of the most notorious criminals in the United States. During his time at Leavenworth Penitentiary, he reared and sold birds and became a respected ornithologist. From 1942 to 1959, he was incarcerated at Alcatraz, where regulations did not allow him to keep birds. Stroud was never released from the federal prison system. He was imprisoned from 1909 to his passing in 1963. Stroud gained a reputation for being a dangerous inmate. He often started fights with fellow inmates and prison staff. This escalated in 1916, where he stabbed a prison guard until his demise. Number 3, Sam Shockley. Shockley presented an IQ of just 68, giving him a mental age of 10 years and 10 months. After robbing a man for his car, robbing a bank, and kidnapping 2 employees, he was sent to Leavenworth. He suffered episodes of hallucinations and demonstrated serious emotional instability and was incapable of coping with a normal prison environment, presenting a risk to himself and others. Rather than transferring him to the medical center for federal prisoners at Springfield, Missouri, officials at Leavenworth sent him to Alcatraz on September 23, 1938, where it was believed the strict routine would better manage him. Shockley was placed for 3 years in the D-block isolation section, for most of the time in the hole or dungeon, the darkened, stripping cells on the ground level where he spent most of his time in darkness. At night, he was allowed a blanket and a mattress. During the day, he was sitting and lying on the cold concrete. His condition deteriorated. He displayed classic schizophrenic symptoms, delusions, auditory hallucinations, and disorientation. His IQ dropped to 54, indicating a mental age of 8. Number 2, George Kelly Barnes, aka Machine Gun Kelly. Barnes, better known as his pseudonym Machine Gun Kelly, was an American gangster from Memphis, Tennessee, active during the Prohibition era. His nickname came from his very favorite weapon, a Thompson submachine gun. He is best known for the kidnapping of oil tycoon and businessman Charles F. Urschel in July 1933, from which he and his gang collected a $200,000 ransom. Urschel had collected and left considerable evidence that assisted the subsequent FBI investigation, which eventually led to Kelly's arrest in Memphis, Tennessee on September 26, 1933. His crimes also included bootlegging and armed robbery. Machine Gun Kelly spent his remaining 21 years in prison. During his time at Alcatraz, he got the nickname Pop Gun Kelly. According to fellow inmate Dale Stamphill, the nickname originated because he told big fish stories. The cons called him Pop Gun Kelly, after cork guns that were popular with kids. The guys didn't take him seriously. This may have stemmed from the fact that, in addition to his exaggerated tall tales, Kelly was a model prisoner and did not act like the brutal gangster his wife, the media, and FBI made him out to be. Number 1, Frank Morris. Frank Morris was born in Washington, D.C. His parents abandoned him when he was 11, so he spent the rest of his childhood in foster homes, an orphan. He was convicted of his first criminal offense at 13, and by his late teens had been arrested for crimes ranging from substance possession to armed robbery. He spent most of his early years in jail serving lunch to prisoners. Later, he was arrested for grand larceny in Miami Beach, car theft, and armed robbery. Morris reportedly ranked in the top 2% of the general population in intelligence, as measured by his IQ testing 133. He served time in Florida and Georgia, then escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary while serving 10 years for bank robbery. He was recaptured a year later while committing a burglary and sent to Alcatraz on January 10, 1960, as inmate number AZ1441. The crew used a raft made of raincoats and fake heads they'd sculpted during their time there to trick the guards. Thanks for watching the video. Like the video if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time!